I just wanted to show you something of this. As I said today, I didn't have the time to get into it, but it is directly connected with something that we talked about. If you know, for those of you who've been coming here for a while or watching on the television for a while, if you remember, back a couple of years ago, we were talking about the discoveries of the human genome, the genetic discoveries, the DNA discoveries, and so forth, and scientists saying that it wouldn't be too long before people will be living to be 200, 300, 400. In fact, there's one scientist who says now that he's confident that within 500 years, people will stop aging at about 32. And he says you could practically say people will live for infinity in their 30s because of the changes that are coming down genetically and through the electromagnetism of the planets and so forth and so on. So we talked about that at length, and as the fact that because of the defective DNA situation that we've found ourselves mired in through a variety of reasons, people are really dying as infants. People die at 80, 90 years old. They're infants. They're babies because they should be living 300, 400, 500 years. Well, I remember the question came up at that time, where would they all go? How could, people be living 500 years, 300 years, 200, 400 years? Where would you put them all? They didn't die off. Well, of course, nature prepares in advance for everything, whether it has to do with animals or humans or the planets or whatever. And we talked about something would have to change in order to accommodate what's going to happen. Well, I have something that I just wanted to share with you, and we'll get into this a little deeper down the road, but this is from Newsweek magazine, and it's on the cover of Newsweek, and this is what it is. Newsweek, no sex please, we're married. And what it talks about, you want to drop that down there, down. What it talks about is a phenomena that is occurring with married people, that they're not having sex anymore. Practically, and what sociologists are looking at, saying, well, they're both working, computers, and everybody's busy, and so forth and so on. That's not what it is. What's actually happening is that obviously if there's less sex among married people, there are going to be less people. And this is going to start to increase the intensity of this particular phenomena. And we'll get into that, and we'll talk about just what's going on. But, if you've been watching here, and we talked about this some time ago, that people were going to live hundreds of years. But in order for people to live hundreds of years, there couldn't be as many people on the planet, being born at the rate that they have been. And look what's happening. See? And as this goes in, sociologists and scientists are trying to figure out what in the world is going on. But electromagnetically, people are now set and are being adjusted to accommodate the fact that we can't have so many people being born on the earth, because people are going to be living hundreds of years, and in fact reach a point where you'll be living infinity. So it's a very interesting thing, and we'll get to this. We'll get to this article down the road, and then show you just exactly how this is playing itself out. So that's an interesting one. What we have been talking about in detail is we've been discussing the nature of human life, and what we've done, we've separated out the two aspects of human life. There's a body, and you know what that is. You have a body, and that's the physical part. Okay? And then there is something inside of the body that operates it, that makes decisions and communicates them through the brain, that operates the arms and legs and all that stuff. There's something in there. There's an intelligence in there. There's a consciousness in there, which we refer to as light, and which religion calls spirit, which is fine. Except I really stay away from that kind of definition simply because once you get into it, and you start, spirit and soul and all that, then you start getting into stuff that you can't prove. And it runs into a dead end. As soon as you start talking about spirit and soul and all that, then you got to bring this word faith, which is very bad, because then that says, well, don't try to think anymore. Just accept this. Just believe it because some guy in a robe said it so. That's baloney. So we don't want to be bothered with that. Okay? Faith. But light, electromagnetism, there's no question about that. We can prove that. Simply go in a hospital and lay down and they'll hook you up to the thing. What do they call those things? EKGs, and you'll see the thing going like that. If it doesn't go like that, you're not going to see it anyhow. So light is a very, very important part. And light, your real identity is actually consciousness. Okay? It's the thing inside that changes your body into a human being. You see? Without the light in there, it's a dead body. With the light in there, it's a human being. See? And that would be the same in any context, whether it be an animal or whatever it might be. But it is the light that makes the decision. And decisions can only be made by consciousness. It can't be made by meat inside of your head. That has to be something inside of you that is using that brain stuff to make decisions. And it happens inside of it happens inside of a fly. I mean, you've seen it where you got a fly and you go to hit the fly and the fly sees it, takes off. See? Because the fly is in its own fly language saying, I better get out of here, I'm going to get hit. So it leaves. But that little stupid little insignificant body on a screen or on a window, it can't do anything, but there's intelligence in there. There's a consciousness in there. So we separated out those two parts, the consciousness and the body. It's like the car and the driver. Okay? Well, if you're going to go on vacation with the car, you can't do that unless there's a driver in it. And if you're going to go on vacation with the body, you can't do it unless there's you inside of it. So we talked about that. So the electrical element, which we are and which God is, that lives inside of bodies and operates them is what we've been focusing on. Okay? That's been the key, that there's more to you than what your mother and father made. Your mother and father made the body. God made the light that operates the body. The Bible, in its wording, says you are the light of the world. And that's really a deep truth to exposing our identity in this strange other world of what we call light beings, the invisible world. Light that can communicate. Light that can see, can hear, can speak, all without using ears, without using eyes, without using a mouth. But yet all of these things are possible. I mean, you can close your eyes and visualize the house you lived in when you were a little child. And it'll be right there in full color. And you won't be seeing it with your eyes. You could stop and listen to your mother's voice and hear your mother's voice. And you won't be, why don't you come on right up here? So it makes it look, we got a few, there you come down, there you go. Look at this. We got customers coming in here. It's terrific. They say, Al. So you have light, okay, that, let's do that. If you were to stop and close your eyes, can you see the house you lived in when you were a little kid? Sure you can. I can. I can see the porch. I can see the little garage that was in the back and all that kind of stuff. You can stop. Can you hear your mother's voice? Sure. And you can even say something. You can say, oh, that guy up there is a nut. And all of these things are happening, and yet you're not using your eyes, your ears, or your mouth. That's what light is conscious. In fact, we have scientific proof that light is organic. Light is able to make decisions. Photons. So here we then are focusing on something far more than our physical bodies. Your physical body looks like the two people that had sex and made it. And if those two people didn't have sex and make that body you've got, that's the end of you. It is not. You'd be in another body, someplace else. Right? What am I going to say? If Ford didn't make a car, I wouldn't be in it? Of course not. I'd go to Chevy or go to whatever. And so it depends on people. In other words, your mother tells your father, why don't you come over some night? Now, if he decides, I don't want to get involved, so much for you. You're out of this because you look like them. Or maybe they came over and your father forgot to stop at the drugstore to buy something, so that it wouldn't happen, and it happened. He forgot. And you're here because of a mistake. He didn't stop at the drugstore. Now, all of this sounds weird, but it's not. It's an actual physical fact that you're created by your mother and father, and you look like them. You were created in their image. But inside of you, the angle of light or the angel of light that came in to make you is created by God. So you have both. You have evolution in the body, and you have creation in the light that operates the body. Okay? You have evolution in cars. They used to have fins, and now they're doing... It's all different. But they're created by car manufacturers, but you that drive them, a whole different thing. It's all the same thing. So here then you have a situation where when your body gets tired, it has to go to sleep. You don't. You never go to sleep. You have never slept one instant in your entire existence. You never go to sleep. Your body does. Your body stretches out on something, bed or whatever, and then what happens? As soon as it does, and as soon as it knocks off, you get out, and you're on the town. And you're having a good time. And as soon as it wakes up, back you go. Because you're attached to it, just like a yo-yo. Out, zip back. Okay? That's the way it works. You ever notice when you have one of these things you call a dream that you never see yourself? You never see yourself. Why? Because you're not dreaming. You're actually involved. There's something going on. There's no such thing as a dream. It's just another existence. It's another part of existence. Your body shuts down and you return. And as you know, going into that other place, there's some pretty wild stuff there. And every so often you run into people that you know. Families and so forth, family members. A lot of, it's a very exciting thing. And if you look at this going to sleep, it's a whole new experience. Because look at it in the context of, I'm going to put this body down, I'm going to get the heck out of here, I'm going to go out tonight. And that's what you do. You put your body down, goes to sleep, door opens, out you go. And you're out of town, and sometimes you can have some pretty wild times out there. But it's real. It's real. It's exciting. So as we consider this element that most people steer clear of, we find ourselves deep, deep, deep in considerations of some strange things. How could that possibly be? And for instance, let's take a look at overhead 297C. We'll take a look at the nebula Eta Carina, which is figuring in some heavy-duty stuff that we're going to be talking about soon. Heavy-duty stuff happening here. If you've been watching TV or the radio or the internet, you find that they have found a planetary solar system that appears to be extremely Earth-like. And it's the closest thing they've seen to... Well, anyhow, make a long story short, it's located in Argo Navis, which is the ship of the Argo, of the Jason and the Argonauts. And here, Eta Carina is the keel of the ship. And Eta Carina, being the keel of the ship, is also the seventh angel of the book of Revelation. And this is where they have found what they suspect may be a place of living things. But anyway, but let me ask you a question about this. If you can look at your body that your parents made and say, okay, here we are, we're all people, we're all human beings, there's life. Now you can look at a tick or a flea or a fly and say, well, yeah, that's alive, and that it does do things. You know, ticks bite people, fly, and they all have something to do for whatever reason. They do what they do, and they make decisions. So there's a consciousness in everything. So it's a person, not a person like you are, but a person, say, in its own way. It's a tick person or a fly person or a flea person or a rabbit person. It's a person. Well, then why isn't that a person? It has DNA coming out of it. It has electromagnetic impulses coming out of it. It's alive. There's something occurring in it. Why isn't that a person? Why? Because it doesn't look like we do. Neither do fleas. And so if that's a person, which I'm telling you it is because the electromagnetism pouring from it, if that's a person, then when you get into the Bible and read about the seventh angel of the book of Revelation, you realize, wow, you know, this is a person with a mission. Okay. Well, that's not the only person. So what I'm saying to you is where there is proof of life and the existence of electromagnetic fields, just like electromagnetic. See, inside of you, it's electromagnetic fields. Inside of this, it's electromagnetic fields. Doesn't look like you, but it's got the same thing going on in the way that a flea doesn't look like you, but also has electromagnetic field. And so it's a person. And it's got a mission. It's got a purpose. Right? Let's take a look at the Hourglass Nebula. Excuse me, Keyhole Nebula. No, the Hourglass Nebula. The eye of the Hourglass Nebula. Who's this? What person is this? So I'm not looking at it anymore as something up in the sky, an inanimate piece of mud and gas. I'm looking at it because of the electromagnetism in it, and of course because of the unique way it appears. But it's a person. It has a reason. And as I said, don't discount it as being a person just because it doesn't look like us, any more than you can discount a dog or a cat or an elephant or a flea or whatever as being a person because they don't look like us. You say, well, a flea, I mean, I don't know, like us. A fly, they don't want any part of you. What does a fly want to be? A fly wants to be a fly. They don't want to be a person. You wouldn't want to be a fly. I mean, you know, you say, boy, I wish I was a bird. But you really wouldn't want to be a bird. But a bird wouldn't want to be you either. First thing that happens when you come out and go near a bird, they take off. Oh, here they come. You know, have you seen those things walking on the earth? Please, I'm out of here. So all of these are persons. Electromagnetism, electrical energy, intelligence, light, for a purpose. And so then you put them together with the electromagnetism in here, and you find out that there is a reason for what's in here, there's a reason for what's there. So, you know, when we use that word person, if we're willing to turn it, say we use consciousness, we have trouble giving something like this, you know, the consideration of consciousness, which means the ability to decide, to think, and to do something. And yet, we see it in little insignificant things. That mosquito wants one thing, your blood. And it wants to find you and land on you and stick. So, I mean, it's got a reason. We could call it an instinct, but there's a purpose. It knows what it wants to do. I mean, you kill a fly, and then there's another fly, and then maybe 3 weeks later, there's another fly. Now, the fly that you killed 3 weeks later is probably the same fly that you killed 3 weeks ago. What is God going to do? Oh, I got to come up with new flies. They just recycle. And it's the same thing with you. It's recycled everything. It's that evolution point. It's the involvement of us in life and growing and learning and understanding and finally overcoming all the lunacy that goes on. So you say, that sounds strange. All of this stuff sounds strange. How can that be a person? This guy's nuts. That must be a cult. And that's what, that's what people say. Mostly religious people that can't deal with anything in reality. So, sounds strange. If you think this sounds strange, let me show you something. Get ready, because when you get into reality, we're not going to dwell a long time on what I'm going to show you, but I'll show you something that if you thought anything was strange before, think of what lies just on the other side of, outside of that little quarter inches of your skull, outside in here in the unknown and the invisible. Let me show you overhead 661. This is really interesting. This is real. The era of the unborn mother. Now, not the unborn child. This is the unborn mother looms as scientists use aborted fetuses to grow human eggs. This has come from Madrid, Spain. A quarter of a century ago, the first test tube baby, Louise Brown, was born. Now scientists have raised another startling prospect: unborn mothers. You want to raise that up a little bit? The notion, get this now, that children can derive from human matter that has not itself been born sounds the stuff of science fiction. Yet it has moved a step closer, with research showing that it is possible to extract ovarian tissue from aborted fetuses for in vitro fertilization treatment. But such a scenario raises grave ethical questions about the possibility of creating children whose biological mothers were never born. So here, just think of that. You could have a human being who never had a mother who was born. Sorry. Now, and the article goes on about the ethics, and forget about all of that. It doesn't make any difference what anybody thinks. I'm not interested now. I'm not talking about whether this is right or whether it's wrong. Who cares? What I'm talking about here is what is reality. When you think things are strange, you haven't even started to see yet the things that are, the things that are real. Say, and here you have a situation of something you never even, in your wildest, you never even conceived of how there could be a human being born whose mother was never born. And you look at the Bible, and it says in some places people who had no mother and no father and all that stuff. So when you get into the the area of scientific reality, the things that are strange could be the things that are very normal. They may offend the consciousness of the religious, or those people who find that this kind of stuff is immoral, but dropping bombs on people's houses is patriotic. Depends what turns you on, So when we look at Eta Carina that we just looked at, or we looked at the eye in the Hourglass Nebula, and I say, well, this is a person, one should look and consider that carefully, and not dismiss it as being crazy, simply because I just showed you a situation where science has concluded that it is not possible for people to be born of a mother who was never born. So you have to listen to something that is not speaking to you from your house or from your television or from the news, something that speaks to you in a different way, in a way that you don't hear the words, but you know that you've been talked to and you know that you've been changed. What I'm talking about is inside of yourself. If you want to find out about And if you want to be part of life that is far beyond the crude, violent existence that humans have developed up to this point, then you have to listen inside of yourself. So let me show you another example of what I'm talking about religion and the way people think and the way people are operating today. Let me look at overhead. Let's show you overhead 662. Here's a picture of the governor of Alabama. His name is Bob Riley. And he has just signed a big tax increase in Alabama because he says his religious views influenced his push. And what he said is there are poor people, and so we're going to have to raise the taxes to help them because that's what Jesus would do. Okay? He says, what does the Bible have to do with tax policy for Alabama Governor Bob Riley? A lot. A biblical tax policy. One governor says yes. You want to bring that down again? So can you imagine? Imagine it. Imagine that you're home and you get your tax bill and the taxes are going through the roof, and you say, why these taxes go up like this? And it's because this is a born-again Christian governor, and he says your taxes are going up because Jesus wants that. My initial reaction would have been, let Jesus pay for it. Understand? Here is what happens when you see what's going on in the world today, the incursion of religion, and in this country mainly Christianity, into politics. I mean, there's a lot of people who live in Alabama who may be Jewish, who may be Muslim, who may be Buddhist, who may be atheists, or could care less, and they're going to have to pay more taxes because Jesus told him that it's what we should do. Okay? In other words, something spoke to him that this is the way it should be. So your tax bill is going to go up because Jesus told him to raise the taxes. I mean, this guy supports the war in Iraq, and he has no problem with bombing people. He has no problem with spending billions of dollars on bombs and missiles and new planes and all these rockets. He has no problem with that. The money that really should be going to take care of poor and sick people. He has no problem with spending money to kill people. And so when he spends all the money to kill people, that's why his state doesn't have any money, because all the money's going over there. Basically, what he should do is take everybody from Alabama over to Iraq, because that's where all the money's going, and then they would be getting fed. Right? But he says, Jesus says, you've got to do this, and so he's doing it. He raises taxes, and then when he raises the taxes, he says, God told him to do it. Jesus told him to do it. And so, but you got to pay the taxes. To me, if God told him to pay, he should pay. But that doesn't mean you. Because, God never told me that I should pay more taxes. Did God tell any of you here that you should pay more taxes? I didn't hear it. And if God told you, go ahead and pay them. It's none of my business. He didn't tell me. But he told this guy. But this guy has the power over other people. And so Jesus told him to pay more taxes. So he's signing a paper so that everybody pays more taxes, even if they don't believe in Jesus. So you see the lunacy that creeps in when people are allowed to run their politics based on their religion. And it's getting very, very popular to do that today. But see, look at the method in this madness. He comes from a Bible Belt. Who will confront him? Who's going to turn around and say, these taxes, this stinks, because he said Jesus told him. Hey, who can come against that? But let me show you this again in a more disturbing example. This comes from a newspaper in Israel called, and you can look, H-A-R-E-T-Z, Haaretz. That's the newspaper. Overhead 663. I hope you can see this. Hearing voices and smiting enemies. Hearing voices and killing enemies. He hears a voice and smites enemies. This was the last paragraph in the Israeli paper Haaretz. Roadmap is a lifesaver for us. Palestine Minister Abbas tells Hamas, based on selected minutes acquired from one of last week's ceasefire negotiations between Palestine Prime Minister Mohammed Abbas and faction leaders from the Hamas Islamic Jihad and blah, blah, blah. Here's the relevant paragraph, admittedly secondhand, but no less tellingly Old Testament for that. Abbas, who's the Prime Minister of Palestine, said that at Aqaba, President Bush, promised to speak with Ariel Sharon of Israel about the siege on Arafat. That's the other guy. He said nobody can speak to oppressor Sharon except the Americans. According to Abbas, the Prime Minister of Palestine, immediately thereafter, President Bush said this. You ready for it? God told me to strike at Al-Qaeda, and I struck them. And then he instructed me to strike at Saddam, which I did. And now I am determined to solve the problem in the Middle East. If you help me, I will act. If not, the elections will come and I have to focus on them. In other words, according to this guy from Palestine, George Bush said, God told me to strike at Al-Qaeda, and God told me to strike at Saddam. Here's a guy, if this is true, and I mean, not only was it in Haaretz, but it was picked up in the Moscow Times. The Moscow Times of June 26 said, so now we know, after all the mountains of commentary and speculation, all the earnest debates over motives and goals, all the detailed analysis of global strategy, it all comes down to this. George Bush waged war on Iraq because, in his own words, God instructed me to strike at Saddam. What's the problem with that? If God instructed him to strike at Saddam and he went over and punched Saddam in the nose, good for him. But the problem here is, God instructed me to strike at Saddam, so I'm sending your son. And it talks about Israeli newspaper Haaretz giving transmits of negotiating sessions and all of this stuff. And so here, probably in a moment where, you know, it's not something he wants to get out to the American press, he's talking to these two holy guys, one Muslim and one Jewish, and he says, God told me to do this, and I did it, and so forth and so on. So you've got to consider your own children. You've got to consider your own sons. You've got to consider your own daughters. God told me to attack, so I sent your kids to do it. Consider this. If God tells you, who can argue? You see what I'm saying to you? God told me to attack Iraq, so I immediately called your sons and daughters over so they could go over and do that. It's not his kids. Bring them on, he says. God's on our side. Let me ask you a question. Do you honestly want your children to be sent into a battle, to be killed and to kill based on what someone believes God told him? That's exactly the premise upon which the Bible wars were waged. What we're seeing today with all of this stuff, and it's not just him. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's the other side. I mean, people fly planes into the World Trade Center because God told them to do it. You know, it's all lunacy, and it all comes from religion. People who interpret all of this stuff literally. Let me show you something. How people, you know, take what God told them to justify the evil that is really in their own minds. It doesn't make any difference if they're Iraqis or Iranians or what they are. If in this country, if they're not part of the Judeo-Christian group, they are enemies of God. But let me show you in the Bible, the Holy Bible, what God told the people there to do. And I compare it kind of with Iraq. Look at the overhead B-141. This is in Numbers 31:9. And the children of Israel took all the women of Midian captives, and their little ones, the kids, and took the spoil of all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods. In other words, they took the women and kids captive. They had killed the men. Same thing is going on over there. And then they took all of their cattle, their flocks, and their goods, and if today we could add, and their oil. Took everything. Because God told them to do it. And they burnt all of their cities and all of their goodly castles with fire. They didn't know what fire was until they looked over there what we saw on television, right? With the missiles and the smart bombs and so forth. Cities and buildings destroyed, people captive, their possessions stolen. The only thing they don't mention is the oil. And if they had it, you can bet it would be mentioned. And it's because God wanted it that way. See? Look at overhead B149. Now this is the next part of the Holy Bible. This is God's chosen people, and this is what they were told to do. Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones. You know what that means? Kill the little boys. Remember when your kids were little boys? Kill every woman that has known a man by lying with him. Every woman that's had sex, kill him. And then the coup de grace. This is the good part. This is what God told us to do. Numbers 31:18. All the women children, the little girls, that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. That's the Bible. How many times has the pastor read this to you? I don't think so. So Moses might have felt bad about killing little women and little boys and little girls and so forth, and then carting off the little girls to sexually abuse them. But hey, that's what God wanted. God told me to do it, not me. See, the Bible is filled with this idea of God telling people to slaughter other people. You can take that down. That's because it is ancient mythology. And these wars are used as symbolic lessons of conflicts that go on inside of the mind. Huh? This kind of evil nonsense is not reserved just for this side of the ocean, please. We got people killing over there and doing all terrible things in the name of Allah. So it doesn't make any difference whether it's in the name of Allah, it's in the name of Jesus, or whatever. It's in the name of God. Just kill people. Let me tell you something. As soon as someone tells you that God told them something, you can excuse yourself and get out of there. Because what they believe is God telling them to do something is themselves doing what they really want to do and trying to justify it. You operate your mind. Nobody else does. God does not talk to anyone because God does not talk. God is not a man. God is not human. God is light. And light does not speak English. It does not speak German. It does not speak Hebrew or French or any other language. God communicates electrically into the circuits of your light essence, which then communicates to your body. And the only time you're ever going to know or ever suspect that you now are flowing in a harmony and some invisible source has changed you is because you are going to start thinking differently. You're going to start doing things differently. And nobody's ever going to say, I want you to do this, or you're going to do this, or this is what's going to happen. If that happens, it's your own mind telling you that. What is going to happen as far as connections with God is simply you feel different. Your opinions are different than they used to be. You don't know how it got that way, but something came over and it changed the way you think, the way you feel. Suddenly, the flags you used to hoist, you're almost disgusting to you now because of what represents the killing and the kids dying and the animal and all this kind of stuff. It's not the way it should be. If you think God told you something, then you can be absolutely sure it never happened. It was your own mind and your own self playing with your mind to somehow justify something to yourself. if you want something of God, then you just have to allow yourself to live and to exist and to wait in your silent meditation, and then what happens? And judge it on the basis of what happens, because you'll never hear anybody or anything talking to you about it. You will never know if God ever told you anything. All you will know is that one day somehow you started thinking differently and you started doing things differently. And then suddenly the people who were close to you suddenly became uncomfortable with the way you were thinking and really, thought you were nuts when you might talk to them about things. Where did this come from? Well, why this change? Because nobody told you, it just happened. Somehow something moved inside of you and you changed. You changed from the way the earth people had been training you, the way they had been instructing you. And now suddenly your way was to look inside of yourself rather than looking out to them for directions. Your way now was out of step with religion. Your way now was out of step with governments. Your way was more flowing with nature. You were more comfortable with animals than you were with people. Well, what happened was God had been tinkering with your stuff in here, and you responded favorably. If someone comes up to you and says, God told me to give you this money, you say, hallelujah, brother, praise the Lord is good. But that person is giving you money because they want to. And in order to call attention to their religious beliefs, they attribute the money ideas to God. That's what they do. They're all running over to Iraq now, all these Christian places, to give people food. Why do they want to give people food? Because they care whether they're hungry? Please. They're going over there to give them food so they can proselytize. They can form groups, more power, more control. If someone comes up to you and says, God told me to attack so-and-so, so I'm sending your son to destroy that so-and-so, look that person deep in the eye and know that they are doing this violence and evil because they want to. See? And they use the Jesus and they use the God thing to get everybody in the mobs and the masses to support them in this crusade. That's what's going on. If you go into meditation and you're giving God permission to change the switches and circuitry inside of the body you occupy, when those circuits are changed, you become different. Nobody tells you, nobody asks you, nobody speaks to you, nobody gives you any signs. The change comes and you feel different and you're aware of this different. Consider how you think now, especially those who have been coming here, and how you used to think. Then tell yourself either yes or no. God must have been tinkering with my stuff. Something changed in the circuits inside of me. And that's the only way you'll ever know. Religion is filled with people claiming God told them to do this or that. And let me just tell you right now, you speak English, you understand English, God doesn't speak English. And the only way that one can open a channel for God to make changes is meditation in which nothing is spoken. No language of any kind is spoken. There is nothing but a void of absolute nothingness, and that's when the change takes place. Close down the lunatics who hear voices, especially the lunatics who hear voices instructing them to do harm. I mean, here you have a guy saying, God told me to fly the planes into the World Trade Center. And then you have another guy say, God told me to invade Iraq. If you bring this poor wretch into court and you say, why'd you kill these people? Well, God told me. I heard voices. God told me to do this. They send him to the insane asylum or they send him to prison for the rest of his life. But when you do it and you're a politician or you do it and you're part of a group, it's okay. You see, it's God. It's lunacy and it's evil no matter how you think of it. Total disregard for life, total disregard for other property, total disregard for nature, ecology, children. bombing and blowing up, and they're doing it. They do it in Israel. I mean, people go to Israel, they go to a wedding or whatever, they're dancing, they're having a nice time. Some maniac comes in because God told him, with a bomb strapped around him, blows the whole place up, kills everybody because God told him to do it. It's the only reason people commit suicide and killing people is because they believe it's God's told them to do it. It's evil insanity, and it is pervaded everything right up to the presidency, to the kings, to religious groups of all kinds. You arrived on this planet Earth as a light being, a consciousness, an intelligence, looking for a body so that you could experience and sense life totally both in the realm of the conscious and in the realm of the physical. But here's the problem. Just think of that. Now let's start it back. Your mother and father had sex. As bizarre as that may sound, that's what happened. Your mother and father had sex. As this little body began to be formed, a little angle of light called an angel of light came down looking for a body, entered through the pineal gland, and found it, and nested and became part of this little body that is you. Okay? Here's the problem with it. Many other light beings had come down from Earth before you, see. But what had happened is they fell in subjection to the lower. I mean, the physical of the Earth is so attractive that they totally cut their connection to that which was the higher. See? They were angles of light who had come into human bodies, that's what we all are, from another place, a higher dimension, cosmic. But when they got to the Earth, they fell deeper and deeper into their connection with that which was the lower and totally separated their connection from that which is the invisible light. They are angles of light who fell, and actually, if you look in the scripture, you'll see that they're referred to as fallen angels. A fallen angel is all of us who, as angles of light, fell for the lower and totally cut our connection with that which is the invisible higher. Okay. So, here you are inside of a little body being formed in your mother, your physical mother, okay? And your physical mother is a fallen angel. Your physical father is a fallen angel. In other words, they're both absorbed in what? They're both absorbed totally in the society. They're both absorbed totally in the physical and the material. They're both absorbed totally and physically in religion, which is a monstrous type of thing that addresses issues based on literal reading of mythological statements in old books. And so that's, when you come outside of that, your mother's body, those fallen angels are the ones who are going to bring you up, are going to train you. And they're going to send you to school where you're going to be taught by fallen angels. And they're going to send you to churches where you're going to be taught by fallen angels. And it's all people who at one time as angels of light entered into bodies, had an opportunity to become life in the most beautiful terms, to live forever in a heavenly earth, but who never were able to find that because the fallen angels who had populated the earth were now the instructors. Okay? And so, you know, what you have is angles of light coming down, entering into a body, and then getting totally broken down in the lower body and totally affected with it to such an extent that they totally cut their umbilical cord with God, with the invisible. And so now all the other angles of light are coming down for thousands of years, and they are going to be raised by those who had already fallen. And so you see what the problem is. And then when these fallen angels, they start having sex with one another, and they're producing. So what are they producing? They're not going to produce those which are light beings of the higher. They're going to produce other angles of light. Which that baby comes out. It could be nurtured into keeping contact through the meditative process with God. But no, it's got to be raised according to now the absorption and the obsession that life and physical life has with that which is the physical and that which is what you can see. And our religion is the same way. Well, the Bible says somebody walked on the water, they teach you they walked on the water. Bible says get baptized, they pour water on your head. Bible says you open the ocean, you open the ocean. They never even start to think of what are the symbolic implications of these things, which take you back up here. Okay? So what have you got? You look around and you find you've got disturbed genetic patterns, disturbed genetic structures. The DNA is all screwed up, and so what happens? You croak at 80, 90 years old, 70 years old, maybe a lot earlier, depends on your DNA. A total revulsion against the invisible light and a mania for the physical. You come in here, talk about the invisible, 15 people here. Of course, well, you know, I'm pleased with the website and everything, but you get down the street where they talk about the physical, you know, and people walking on water and all this stuff, and they throw smoke around it. The place packed. Because that all fallen angels, if you would. Huh? Okay, 5 minutes.
How do you break the cycle?
You know. Good question. How do you break the cycle? Do you have the Newsweek? I'll tell you how to break the cycle. You don't break the cycle's being broken for you. Suddenly a phenomena is striking the earth. Young people are too busy and don't feel like having sex anymore with one another when they get married. This is a tremendous phenomenon that's occurring on the earth. And what is happening is you're saying what we call God, the invisible, is breaking the cycle because it is now time to stop the creation of people who are going to follow. So in other words, as the higher starts to involve itself in all of the affairs of people of the earth, it will also involve itself in the workings of the mind. If you can take that up. If you have broken the cycle for your life, and somebody moves in the house next door to yourself who's a bunch of fallen angels, still your life would be miserable. So in other words, it is not good enough for one or two or three. It has to be a massive change. And that's coming from Etta Carina. That's coming from the hourglass. That's coming from this new thing found in Argo Novus. That's coming from the cosmos. It is the change coming down from above. It is the change coming down from God. So, to change the electrical patterns in the mass mind, because now it's gotten to the point where they don't use swords to kill each other, they don't use rifles to kill each other, they don't use artillery to kill each other. Now they can do such damage that they can actually destroy the earth. When we were bombing in Iraq, they were having earth disturbances in Russia as a result of the awesome power of these things. So if you get up to this point here, that God is saying, okay, they're out of control. They're at the point where they're going to wreck the whole damn place, and so we better, it's time now. But this is simply a normal, natural thing. You get to a point where you start off trying to figure out how to make a wheel, and you start off trying to figure out how to make fire, and then you evolve to the point where now you can make these things that can go right down somebody's chimney and kill thousands or millions of people and all this stuff. Now you've reached a point where control has to interfere. It's like sometimes when you're correcting a child, say, stop that, you better stop that. And then finally say, hey, now you've gone too far, and you grab the kid. Well, it's the same thing. So we see all of these things, we see these genetic structures, and we have taken the instructions that were brought down to earth by the light, outlining how to live in a body and coexist, and we've seen these instructions prostituted to satisfy fallen light beings' need to control and do battle, and that's called religion and government. And as you occupied this body, when that body was prepared to come outside
and to exist on its own, you immediately came under the direction and the instructions of those who had fallen and were a fallen race and disturbed, and they passed their horror onto you, and it became part of your life. People, yes?
The body, everybody, we're light in consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But who has the control? Who has the strength? Who controls who? The body?
Well, the question is, we're bodies and we're consciousness, and who controls who? This is here's let me just show you. Here's a speaker's platform. Okay, it's right here. This is a body. All right. Now, speaker's platform. Move to the left. Okay. Now consciousness comes along, right? Because the body can't move, can it? This thing cannot move. I want you to move to the left. Boy, wouldn't it be something if it did? I want you to move to the left. Okay? But consciousness comes along now. And consciousness says, it is consciousness that controls. It is the light inside that controls. But here's the problem. If the light inside, which is a higher, which is the God part, comes down and becomes so enamored with the physical that it enjoys the physical to such an extent that it starts to want to control, it starts to want to attack, and so forth and so on, it gets so low that it is no longer capable of making that which is the right decisions. It makes the physical decisions. It's not making the decisions based on the conscious control. See? The conscious control is up here. The physical control is down here. Well, the light which came from down here, instead of keeping its antenna pointed this way, it's pointing its antenna that way. Okay? In other words, instead of watching arts and entertainment, instead of watching Discovery, it's watching Playboy. And I'm not knocking that either. I'm just trying to give you an example. The attention of the light has been distracted to such an extent, it is fully now, and fully feels that the physical is the only way that we can be saved, that the mess can be changed. Not realizing that truly the only way that it can be changed is up here. Okay?
Well, you know, for years, people have been told by God to do something.
Right.
You've seen the news all the time.
Yes.
Now, they do something, and it's wrong as far as we're concerned.
Yes.
Where's the consciousness come in right there? I mean, who's right and wrong right there at that point?
Right, okay. The person who has been told by God to do something is not doing something because God told them to do something. They're doing something because they want to do something.
But that's consciousness, though.
That's consciousness. But it's the consciousness that is connected to the lower, not the consciousness that's connected to the higher.
So there's a higher and lower consciousness.
There's a higher and lower, absolutely. There's a God consciousness up here, which is contacted only via meditation through nothingness, and then there's a regular consciousness. So the point is, you can either follow this higher, which says, no, you can't, you're not going to want to kill, you don't want to abuse animals, you don't want to abuse kids, you don't want to do all these horrible things, you can't justify killing anything. Or you can follow this lower that says, well, yeah, we have to kill these people, and then we'll raise the flag and have a parade.
Well, something in the physical has got to control that consciousness to make it strong or weak.
Oh, absolutely. You look at the difference here. You have the consciousness, okay? That's the consciousness. And you have the body, that's the physical, okay? Now, one or the other alone, consciousness without a body is invisible. A body without consciousness is dead. But when you have consciousness plus a body, it equals a human being or an animal being, but it equals a being. Okay? Consciousness and a body. Whatever that body may look like, if it has consciousness in it. Now here's a body. It has no consciousness in it. Okay? So that's why it can't move when I tell it to. See? You can get a dog or that has a consciousness and say, come here, come on in, and the dog will come in because it has a consciousness in it. And that dog also many times will say, I ain't going in there, and it'll run the other way because it made a decision, has a consciousness.